Hello and welcome back. This is Soccer Officiating, PHE 289, and as I indicated in the introduction that hopefully you've all had a chance to look at, we're going to go ahead and begin with the very first rule, or Rule 1, the field. I've gone ahead and taken the liberty of pulling up that on the screen that you can see here. This is the, didn't scan very well, did it? But anyway, bottom line is this the page 10 of the rule book that you're going to be using for the class. Remember, the whole idea of this is to prepare you for high school soccer officiating next fall. So we want to make sure that you're familiar with absolutely every aspect of this, of the rules as we possibly can, or as I possibly can. Notice that this is not a complete copy of the rule. There's a few pages to this, but it is not that complex. However, there are some things that you need to be aware of as it pertains to this rule, as it pertains to the laws of the game. To begin with, what I'd like to do is go ahead and provide for you a very brief video. Let me go ahead and do that here. We'll bring it back and start it again so that you can kind of get a feel for what's going on.
Field of play. In the same way we call a baseball field a diamond, a football field the gridiron, a soccer field is called a pitch, more than likely a throwback to the British game of cricket. When they set up their field, a part of it is called pitching the stumps. Don't worry though, there are no stumps in soccer. Law 1 has a lot of standards of measurement that aren't really applicable in a youth soccer game, because the teams are smaller, the fields are smaller, the ball is smaller, the goals are smaller, heck, even the players are smaller. But there's some elements of Law 1 that apply to every soccer match, and that's what we'll focus on today. Law 1 states that matches must be played on natural or artificial surfaces. That pretty much covers every kind of surface. Also, the field of play must be rectangular. It can't be a circle, a triangle, a trapezoid, or a square. Now you're probably thinking, hey, a square is a rectangle. True, but Law 1 goes on to say the length of the touch line must be greater than the length of the goal line. And those are two important lines to know, which make up the boundaries of the field. On a soccer pitch, there are two sets of parallel lines. The longer line is called the touch line. The touch line is what in other sports we might call the sideline, but in soccer, it's called the touch line. I like to remember it as the only place on a soccer pitch where to put the ball back into play, you touch it with your hands. The other line we need to remember is the goal line. Like I said earlier, the goal lines are shorter than the touch lines. And at the center of each goal line, we place, ta-da, a goal. Now, sometimes the goal is two flags stuck in the ground, a couple of traffic cones, or even a pair of shoes. But hopefully, it's two upright posts joined by a horizontal crossbar.
Okay, that's quick, down and dirty, okay? And what we can do from that is take a look at a couple of other pieces to Rule 1. Needless to say, the objective of this particular lesson is to provide you with the nomenclature as it relates to the field. And to do that, the best way, I think, is to kind of give you the soccer diagram, which, by the way, you'll also find in your book. But this is according to the National Federation of High Schools, and gives you all the dimensions that you need. But let's go ahead and make sure that you understand all aspects of what's going on here. And I'll flip back and forth to these things occasionally. To begin with, what I need to make sure that you're aware of, let me go ahead and set this up and get it going, okay, for you. Make sure that we've got the right line here. I got my color set up. There are different places on the field as it relates to the high school, the collegiate, the youth, or the select team soccer fields. For example, let's go ahead and begin with this. The corner area, the circle, the halfway circle, the halfway line, as identified here in the diagram. We have three rectangles within our, if you will, within our field, or within our field diagram. One is the goal, okay? Number two would be our goal box, and number three will be the penalty area. As you identify all three of these things, let's go ahead and make sure that you understand some of the nuances as it works out to each of these particular boxes in each of these areas. And that's going to be the critical piece. you're going to hear a great number of similarities as it relates to these numbers on the field diagram, that is, as it relates to next rules or rules down the road. Okay, I'll give you some of that here in just a moment. For example, when we talk about a field like this, well, honestly, let me go ahead and just bring that back up for you. Okay, if you will, take a look. This field is set up as a maximum of 100 and I believe it's 120 as the max. Yeah, 120 max, but it needs to be no less than 100 yards long. Okay, so the minimum 100, max 120. In addition, the width in this particular case will be anywhere from how do they identify it? I want to make sure that I'm doing this right because I use different segments. 55 yards wide up to 80. Now, believe it or not, the collegiate game uses the maximums on both of those as their maximums as well, 120 by 80. That is a very large field. But as you'll find, your better teams, the teams that are very competent in their soccer skills and playing ability as a team, prefer to have the larger field. What does this mean to you? Well, as a soccer referee, you're going to have to run a lot more, okay? But as we take a look at some of the pieces to a soccer field and the nomenclature, let's go ahead and make sure we also talk about the dimensions of some of these areas. How about this? For example, when I come in here and I talk about the corner arc, I'm talking about a 1 yard area there. That's 1 yard arc. The ball can be placed anywhere within or on the lines. That would be these lines as well, okay? This line here, or this line here, or this line here that makes up the corner arc. The ball can be placed on any of those and still be placed legally and play from those positions. That's a 1 yard arc. When we talk about the 18, or the penalty area, okay, let's go ahead and give it that other name, the 18, okay? The reason that's called the 18 is simply this. As we look at this dimension from here to the goal line, that works out to 18 yards, okay? This dimension from here, from the line itself into, sorry, my line's not real straight, into the inside upright of the goal is, believe it or not, 18 yards, okay? Oops, that looks like 18 feet, but it's not meant to be, okay? Let me go ahead and zap that little line so it's not confusing. It's supposed to be 18 yards. So that's why it's called the 18, okay? Now, there's another dimension that you'll need to know, that when we connect these two right here, that's supposed to be 44 yards. How do we figure that out? Well, it's pretty simple, and you'll see how it works here as I go ahead and continue with my diagram. Once again, 18 from here on into the goal area, okay, and from here out, making it a rectangle, all right? The reason we know that that's going to be 44 yards is we have 18, we have 18. Right now you're up to 36, right? What about this area right here? It's called the goal. Well, believe it or not, that's 8 yards. So what we've got is a total of, and I think you can see this, now let's go ahead and do it down here, a total of 44 yards. If you add up this, plus this, plus this, total of 44 yards. Who's responsible for making sure that that works? Well, you are. So, pre-game, you're going to go out there and walk all this stuff off. One of the recommendations I would make to you right now is for you to check your stride. In other words, go somewhere, mark something off, and get competent with figuring out what a yard is, okay? Likewise, we've got a couple of other areas here as well. Let's go ahead and talk about the goal box, or the goal area, as a lot of people talk about, or they'll also call it the 6. How's that measured? Well, how about this? That is going to be 6 yards. In addition, we're going to go 6 yards here from the inside of the goal area, the upright of the goal, out 6 yards to make that corner. Total of 6 out, 6 into the field of play. So now we call it the 6. Okay? Now I bet you can figure out very quickly the length of the line, this line here. I'll go ahead and outline it for you. We can figure that out. Once again, not a very straight line. Sorry about that. Anyway, through the same calculation I made just a few moments ago with the 18. Let's take a look at it. If this area here is 6 in, or 6 out from the inside of the upright to 6 yards into the field of play, if this is 6 yards here, and this is 8, we already know that. 6 plus 8, 14, plus 6 more will be 24 yards wide. That's how wide the goal area is. Once again, who checks that? You do. Here's something else that you want to take a look at too on your pregame. Go ahead and let's make sure that you know that this little guy here, according to the rules of the game, is 12 yards from the goal line. Okay? Extremely important. By the way, there's a couple of other things that you need to be aware of as well. Well, needless to say, this line bisects the field into 2 equal halves. Okay? You're going to hear me talk about the defensive and offensive or attacking thirds of the field. Go ahead and kind of give you a clue about that as well. These are not lines that you're going to find typically in any book, but when we get into rules that deal with fouls and attacking and strategies of the game, that's what I'm talking about. Okay? And you can see them here on the field. Will you find these on any field? Absolutely not. This is just for yours and my conversation and talking. Okay? That's going to be incredibly important for us to deal with as we get into the rules of the game. But anyway, I did want to make sure that you saw what we were talking about, this line bisecting the field into 2 equal halves. And then when I start talking about things from an officiating standpoint of view, we're going to be talking about the defensive third, the middle third, and the attacking third of the field. Just kind of give you an indication. I provided that for you for just a moment ago. Let's go ahead and talk about this little guy right here. And what I'm talking about is the center circle. This little guy has a 10-yard radius. Okay? Radius. That makes this 20 yards total. Sound like a large area? Yeah. There is a significance to that. And who's responsible for that? Once again, that's going to be you. This will come into play as we get into some of the subsequent rules as it relates to the game. But notice that this little guy has a 10-yard radius, or 20 yards from point A. Let's go ahead and make that right here, to point B over here. That's going to be a total of 20 yards, but that thing has a 10-yard radius. Okay? Now, why is that important? What's important with that? Well, to be honest with you, like I said, we'll get into that when we get into the start of the game and how important that little guy is. Here's another one I want to make sure that you're aware of. From here, we've already determined this is 12 yards. Okay? But what do you think this little guy is right here? Okay? We call it the arc, the penalty arc. Penalty box arc is identified here. There's a reason that that's there as well, and you need to have it on the field. Will you play the game if in fact it isn't there on the field, is it not light on the field, or it's dim, or whatever? Yeah, sure you will. But it's something that you're going to want to make sure you know about prior to the game beginning, you know, and have a feel for it just in case you need to use this as referee. That's exactly what it's about. Your use of these lines as a referee and for the player's benefit. Well, wait a minute. What is this arc thing really about, and why is it there? Well, honestly, let's go ahead and get rid of some of this stuff so that we all have a better way of seeing some things. I'm going to go ahead and just eliminate an awful lot of this stuff up here so that you can get a clear look at the field. Okay, you got your dimensions. It's in the book anyway, so you know this is not going to be new news. Okay, let's go back to the penalty arc here. This little guy is measured from the penalty spot and works out to a 10-yard radius. Okay, you would say 10 yards here, 10 yards here radius. Gee, what about that 10-yard thing? There's a lot of that 10-yard thing going on, and we'll get into that as the class progresses. Let's talk about a couple of other things as it revolves around the field. For example, the touch line, the longer of the two lines, here and obviously down here, gets its name, as you heard from the narrator in the video. This is where the ball can be put into play after it's been touched by somebody outside of the field of play. How do we do that? We do that with a throw-in, for those of you who are familiar with this. If you're not, that's fine too. We're going to get to that in a subsequent rule. Actually, it's way down the road. But the bottom line is the ball must totally pass over these two lines for it to become into what we call touch. In other words, you can touch it there. This game is very interesting. Let's face it, you don't play it with your hands. It's with the rest of the body. The biggest part of it being the feet and the legs and what have you. But nevertheless, the hands are not involved in this, so therefore you cannot touch it in the field of play, rather only outside of the field and only after it crosses these two lines as I'm indicating. Let's talk about the goal box here in just a second. I'm going to bring this on down here. I want to bring up another video or another okay, I want to bring you back into the rule with regards to the goal itself. The goal area is defined by the uprights, if you will. And by the way, in high school soccer, these things can now be tubular. All right, they don't have to be square posts. All right, connected by a crossbar. All right, and what's going to happen there with this thing in terms of dimensions? It's going to be like this. And you can see it down here at the bottom. The crossbar must be 8 feet above the ground, okay? And that crossbar is 24 feet or 8 feet wide, 8 yards wide, as I indicated earlier on my diagram. Those bars, the uprights themselves, as we discussed them, must be no longer than 5 inches wide. Okay, there's a reason for that. I'll explain that. This is an NC2A diagram. Don't worry about that because the National Federation indicates that the uprights can only be 4 inches in width. Okay, and that's okay. But anyway, this thing is 8 feet wide by, 8 yards wide by 8 feet tall, and a net is usually attached. I haven't been I've officiated for an awful lot of years. I haven't seen too many of these games played without a net. Okay, and some of those can be very, very sophisticated. There is one thing, though, that you need to know about the goal that as pertains to high school soccer officiating, and that basically is this. If, in fact, the team uses a goal that's manufactured that has legs that are supported by, on the field, bracing, if you would, those things must be anchored. Yes, absolutely. Can you believe it? Sure enough, these things have been known to tip over and injure players. We do not want that to happen, so they must be anchored. Here's a must for you. If the goal is set up so that, in fact, the uprights are not permanently attached to the ground, in other words, sunk in the ground, and have a bracing system that allows it to go behind the goal with a support mechanism behind the goal, that must be anchored. You may not start a high school contest unless these goals are anchored, permanently affixed to the ground some way. Well, temporarily, if in fact you use sandbags or some other mechanism that keeps them where they're supposed to be. One of the other recommendations I would make, while this is not on the test, this is just something for your edification. When you walk out in the field and you're inspecting all this stuff, you see people, goalkeepers, hanging on the crossbar and so forth like that, I highly recommend that you encourage them not to do so. Bending that bar creates another problem if in fact they do bend the bar, then you've got another issue that you're going to have to deal with, because that cannot be allowed to happen. A new goal would have to be brought in and replace that which has been damaged by people hanging on the bar or touching, all sorts of things. Just be cautious around this thing. Remember that they can be tubular in the frame, okay? That they must be anchored before you can begin the contest. Okay, back to my diagram. And I just want to make sure that we know a couple of other things that are going on with the field. I'm going to go ahead and identify one of them right now, okay? And that is, for some reason, not the right one, so hang on just a second. I got to find the new one. Don't move. There we go. Notice that on our soccer field here, within a variety of dimensions and what have you, that we have 4 corners to this thing. Well, that makes some sense, doesn't it? Okay. Each one of these corners has a flag on it. That flag needs to be no shorter than 5 feet tall, with a non-pointed end on it, okay, so that people can basically see where the corners are. That becomes very important to you as the referee throughout the contest, okay? In addition, as you take a look at all of this, we have the penalty mark here. Could be a 9-inch spot up here in the penalty area. It is a 9-inch spot at the center of the field as well. We've pretty well covered our dimensions. Okay. Yeah, let me go. Yeah, I lost track of something. I want to make sure that we were good with this. That the corner flags right there, all right, need to be 5 feet high with a non-pointed end to them, all right. And let me go ahead and bring this other thing up so that you can see it again. I want to make sure that you're very well aware of this, that the coaching areas are identified once again in your book on page 9, and they'll show you the dimensions and how close the team area can be to the field of play. As you can see on my diagram here, it is only 10 feet, okay? And that, by the way, is different for other venues. But anyway, when you get right down to it, that's about it. There's not a great deal about the field of play, all right? Yeah, and by the way, let me go ahead and refer you back to YouTube so that you can, I mean, if you put in YouTube, laws of the game, rules of the game, etc., you can get a lot of different perspectives with regards to the soccer field. But bear in mind, you're going to be tested over this soccer field that you're going to find in your book. Okay? So, rule 1, the soccer field. Look forward to seeing you when we start talking about the ball, and that's even shorter.